Great work as always, guys. Um, I sent you a couple primitive cave paintings of my work in progress from this week. Work I did with in the True Story Circle with my mentors there on Thursday morning, and it had to do. And I'm going to briefly summarize it. A cartoon method of turning any irritation into action. It goes back to when I was a child, and I used to have nightmares when I was in my neighbor's basement, and it had a black and white tile floor, little black squares, and surrounded by 9 white squares, if you will, so black dots primarily. And it had those steel bars that would hold up the cross beam, as you do. And I would be down there, it'd be deathly quiet, and I would hear a little noise, and I could see a little black speck of dust of nothingness, and it would slowly start rolling towards me. And I could jump from black square to black square and avoid this slow rolling thing. But I noticed it would slowly get a little bit bigger and a little bit faster and quicker to turn with each iteration. So it was learning and adapting to me. And it was filling me with absolute terror, because as it would get bigger, it would be screening out other things in my field of vision. And in my ears, I could hear the beating of drums getting faster and faster and scarier. And I would wake up in a cold sweat, and I couldn't go back to sleep from fear of seeing that thing again. Later in my life, it was like the big white bubble in the Prisoner. But this was about 20 or 30 years before I'd ever seen it. And the way I handled it was I took my favorite superhero, Mighty Mouse, the cartoon character, and Mighty Mouse would come in and just pulverize that thing. And for the next long moment, I was okay to sleep. And so that always stuck with me. And I've actually used that in my entire life as a way to envision getting through tough times. And maybe not getting through it, but taking the first step from fear is the persona Mighty Mouse. And so it's always been, that's been with me for 60 years. Well, I noticed that I was not happy at work. I was starting to hate the Army and the school for its inertia. I was becoming irritated and I could see it becoming hate because they were not acting to transform with my good ideas as fast as I demanded, no matter what I did. And so what I learned in this little exercise this week and last week with the True Story guys, I worked on it. And I externalized the irritation by concentrating on it as that little black ball of hate, and making that as exaggerated as I could and as compressed as I could into a compressed black hole, but it was also red and violent and crackling and snapping and burning flesh, and all the hate that I was feeling for the Army, exaggerated the irritation to that level. And then I externalized it by simply taking it out of the garden and putting it into deep space where I could work on it someday without endangering the garden. And in the garden, I now had this black hole of emptiness that was no longer painful, but it was a great. So I just filled that with good soil and water and cool, loving kindness, and prepare the ground and plant some seeds and make it part of the garden, and everything is fine. No, I still got work to do, and that is I put this ball of hate out into the universe. So now I got to do something with that. So I go out into deep space when I'm ready, and I turn that hate into energy to do work on something that is aligned with my mission and purpose, and whatever that is, I'm now ready to go. So I took that basic principle, said, now how do I combine that with the cartoon characterization? And as David Bogie and Grace Ann Rosile, his wife, teach, is to make that problem a character in the story that we are reworking. So this is called restorying. So what I did is I decided before I could name the problem, it was going to be the problem of a character about whom I had certain feelings. And I was going to pick a cartoon character that I absolutely love and feel empathy for and want him to do well, and I'm going to try to help him. But he's got a particular problem, which is the named problem of irritation with inertia. So immediately what came to my mind was Ludwig von Drake, who's the mad scientist duck in Donald Duck in Disney, and he's always right. Got the speaking with the funny accent and can never quite get things quite right, and you know what I mean by that. And I put him in a situation that was becoming increasingly uncomfortable for him, and that was that he was playing the role of Nero and fiddling while Rome burned. And you could imagine how frustrated he would be with that. He's trying to play the fiddle, and there's all this smoke and fire, and he doesn't know what to do except be himself. And we can all see what he's got to do, and that is, 1, stop fiddling. 2, put out the fire. 3, the next thing. And as soon as I did that, I realized that he was a mirror of me. And that the irritation that he was feeling with the fire in Rome interfering with his fiddle playing was a projection of me delaying and not getting the book project done that other people were relying on me to do. And I was encountering perfection syndrome and a little bit of writer's block. And so rather than fixing that in the way that I already know how to do, I chose to shift my attention to the army and to decide to become irritated with them, moving away from skepticism towards cynicism and hate, and that was affecting the things that I was choosing to look at to reinforce that feeling, and then I could avoid doing the work that I was supposed to do because I had something to be irritated about. So it turns out that just by doing that, I was able, oh, okay, it really was about what was inside me. So stop fiddling around and start producing words. ChatGPT is helping me do that. I ask it what my teachings are on a certain thing. It goes out into the world, finds it, and that turns out to be pretty good content for our book. It was so good that it became the psychological chapter in the book based on the 90-minute podcast I told you about at the opening of this thing. It's when I transcribe it, it's going to be that thing. So I'm just treating myself with loving kindness and thankful to Ludwig von Drake for being the guy that can carry the heat and take the load and help me get through it, along with my buddy Mighty Mouse. If I feel fear, it's Mighty Mouse. Here we go. If it's procrastination, it's Ludwig von Drake. And here we go. And those are my two bigger problems that to contend with. So that's made a big difference. That little image in flashcard 2 is sort of the generalized procedure of how to be in a state of perfect harmony and balance, and then you notice something, and then you forget everything else and you end up focusing on that thing. And then I just exaggerate that thing when it's inside me till it's just crazy, and just don't try to resist. Just go all into it and blow it all out of proportion safely inside you. characterize it, put it into deep space, go fix the garden to get back into loving kindness and gratitude and forgiveness, then go take care of the business, turn that thing into energy, and the energy of that is going to do work, and that work is going to be something you create. And it could be, and it's going to be an artifact, a checklist, an improvement, an edit to a piece of paper, a sketch, a project, the step 1 of 10 of the next thing. Whatever it's going to be is you're going to do work, which means changing the world in a permanent way, in a physical, measurable way, that you actually did some work. You have to move mass through time and space with energy. Something active has to change. So that leads me to say that the formula is aligned with something like this, that when you sit down to reflect on things and whatever, and you do divergent thinking, go ahead and diverge. And then at some point you converge, and you get back to the, now I've come to the end of the conversion, and I've laid it all out, and I've thought about it, and I've seen where I've been. Oh, good, job done. No, that's just step 2. You converged, and then the most important thing is what's next. So figure that out. What's the next thing I need to do as priority 1 in total alignment? What do I got to do? For me, it was fix the hole in the garden, because the other thing is waiting for me in deep space. It ain't going away because I'm not forgetting it, and I have an obligation to go take care of that in due course. But first things first. Take care of the garden, loving kindness, plant some seeds, set it up, let it grow, because you can't make it grow faster than it's going to grow. So while you're waiting for it to grow, instead of monkeying around with it, go off campus and go do some work that you have now committed to and take care of that. And then come back and see how the garden only needs you on a periodic basis to tend the garden and mend the garden. Tending the garden allows the garden to mend you and make you better and more resilient, in the same way that welding is stronger than the 2 separate pieces of metal if you do it right. So that output of the measured work, I have no idea what the work of the applied creativity is going to be, but it has to be completed. It has to be a thing that I can hand to somebody else as an artifact. I can put it on the shelf, can put it in the library, can put it on the street, can offer it to other people to pick up and use as they see fit, or to just let it sit there and be another stone stacked on stones on the beach as the tide rolls in and the tide rolls out. So that little procedure right there is the sketch process of that procedure, which works for me and has never failed. And the energy that comes from the irritation, the self-disgust, and all of that is simply emotions telling you that there's some work to do, and here's some energy to do it with. Now, how long are you going to monkey around and quit fiddling around until you get on with whatever the emotion was, fear or greed or irritation or self-loathing? But immediately I seize on it, blow it out of proportion just to get on with it, in order to compress the amount of time that it takes me to accumulate negative energy before I finally decide to fix something. So let me just, instead of trying to resist that, let me just go all in and be a lunatic in a safe space and blow it all out of proportion in inner mental theater, and then turn that into action right away. If I can do that in 5 seconds or 10 seconds, I can become very productive by getting over the resistance to the needed change. Every one of those little specks leads to something foundational inside me that I need to be working on. And this method of the cartoonizing, idealizing, and storytelling is actually the way I go about doing that. So the other flashcard I sent you was kind of the text that I did in the session as I was describing in public what I was doing without knowing where the next steps were. I mean, you want to talk about being naked and unafraid in the theater. And at the end of that, as I started reflecting on it, I then drew the stylized version to make it easier to tell the story with pictures, because my handwriting's not that good anymore. So that was my work in progress. I want to note that I probably got 40 ideas for additional articles for the Owl Wisdom project here, to get going and add into Owl University. That thing is already astonishing, and I'll get you enrolled in that here in a second, dear Jeff, to get to it. Let's see. I want to say, draw the 10 boxes, Chun-Li, and then in a red line, just the first one, it gets you to no lose plus dinner for two. That leaves you all that other space in there to explore safely, like a professional. And as long as you don't cross the red line, you're okay. You're just exploring the space. That's really crucial. The 2 or 3 to 1 that gives you the space to work with. Think about it like you're cutting wood for a project. You start with the rough cut, so now it's manageable. That's like framing it at 2 or 3 to 1. You draw the template of what you want the trade to be in pencil, and then you cut around to take away the excess wood, and now you can do a fine cut to get it very, very close to the line, and then you finish it with sandpaper so that it's just right. So you really have those 3 approximations. I think of that as the way that I do the hybrid trading. The daily charts to get in the ballpark, the 30 minutes for the fine-tuning, and then the 3-minute for finishing. And that gives me the right mindset to approach this through the craft work of, in this case, woodworking. And I find that helps me negotiate the roles and the decisions and the choices I make, and that when I'm finished, I'm finished. That is now the zero state. That thing is going on the shelf. I'll study it later. On to the next bowl, that kind of thing. So rough, fine, and finish, I think, would be the way I would say that. And that's, I think, everything for me. So I want to hit the tones and ask you to listen for the word for the week ahead. And then we can chit-chat a little bit. We're about at the 80-minute mark, and we can chit-chat a little. And I got some soccer to get to for the academy practice in about an hour. So they're waiting for me over there, them little guys. And aho.